Welcome to Conversations for Our Time, podcast number 22 with the Quiet Sun team, George and John. Last podcast, we went into bio amendments such as compost teas and compost extracts and why it's good for the health of the soil, the plants, so that it helps to increase the yield for nutrient-dense food. We went into what fungi is, how it is all around us, the importance of it, and its recycling to create a new, that it's so vast that it even creates forests, and the science behind it. How important the mycorrhiza fungi for the soil is, and the symbiotic relationship it has with the roots of the plants we call the rhizosphere. Breaking down the word, even breaking down the word mycorrhiza, it's really composed of two terms. Myco is fungi, and rhiza refers to the root systems of the plant. So everything that we speak of is in the words in itself. So we also went into much more detail of the cation exchange, what it is, science of it, and how important all this is to really understand and have that mental connection of how it all works, how nature works, observing nature, allowing her to be our teacher, and then allowing ourselves to be the student so we can ultimately evolve and learn and grow. But when we talk about the science of these things, we want to break down all the components and open it up so that we can really understand it, fully, step by step, because it's all there for us to learn. And ultimately, we get closer to nature and get closer to ourselves. So even breaking down those words, judgment, amendments, attunement, atonement, ment in Latin means mind. Anything to do with the mind is mental. That is the first principle of natural law. All is in the mind. It's a hermetic principle. Mental, all ment, all mind. So judging the mind, amending the mind, tuning the mind, atonement or breaking down atonement is at one mind. It's where the balance is, and everything is about balance. So this is why it's so important to understand anything that we do in life so that, we can make that mental connection. So this will be part 12 of the mini series, and we really do hope you're enjoying it. So how you doing, John?
I'm good, thanks, George. It's been an interesting week. Lots coming up for me personally. I'm still aching after our ecstatic dance on Saturday. I think I was jumping around a bit too much, but a lot of fun. Good way to release energy. I know you had a good time as well. And it's interesting, this kind of voyage that we're on. I watched a really good documentary which I sent you, which was done back in 2007, I think, called Kymatica.
Yeah.
And they talked about word magic, actually. I think the director or creator is a guy called Benjamin Stewart. But I really liked it because he talked about the interrelated play between the human being and the universe. And the universe obviously is all one, one verse singing together. This vibrational frequency that kind of is emitted by these energetic particles throughout the universe. And I listened to I can't remember his name now, but he was like a philosopher and a thinker back in, I think it was like the 40s. What was his name? But anyway, it was really interesting because he was talking about um, magnetic fields. Oh, Manly P. Hall. You might have heard of him.
Yeah, I'm familiar with his work.
Yeah,
Absolutely deep esoteric knowledge that the guy had.
yeah, and he's some people call him a Freemason, whatever, but I'm not really interested in that. What I'm interested in what he was actually saying, and it's a really Diamond posted it on his Rumble channel. It's only like 20 minutes long, but he was talking about how everything creates a magnetic field, as we all know. Well, most of us know this, and this is measurable, and that the magnetic field that human beings or all life emits or creates through the process of just living is our protective barrier, right? And this electromagnetic field protects us from all negative influences. Now, the interesting thing is there are things that you can do to weaken your magnetic field. And that is everything from the thoughts you have to what you put in your body to the actions you create. And, even if you look at this in terms of karma, right? If you're always creating bad actions, we can pick any one of these crazy, powerful, rich people on the planet. They're creating all these bad actions or karma. So what do you think is going to happen to their magnetic field? They're going to get pulled further into the darkness, you know? But if you could just continually create good actions, and it doesn't mean you can't assert yourself or get angry or whatever, but you're cleansing yourself all the time. And the more positive actions you create, and the more you're aligned with your mission and the more authentic you are, the stronger your magnetic field gets. And therefore, things can't penetrate through that magnetic field. So the simplest way to look at this is if you eat clean, healthy food and you don't expose yourself to too many electromagnetic or artificial electromagnetic frequencies, you're very unlikely to get sick. If you have a sharp mind, you're very unlikely to get fooled. And if you're in touch with your emotions, you've or you just train yourself in that way, you're very unlikely to suffer with ailments of that nature. And it's the same spiritually as well. So the reason I'm kind of mentioning this is because everything we talk about is all interrelated. And it's the same with the soil, that there's always this energy held in the soil. So this Manly P. Hall was talking about every single atom has a magnetic field around it. So if that exists within us, it also exists within the soil where life is. So this is the way I like to think about when we're trying to regenerate soil. What we're really effectively trying to do is bring energy back into it. So it's really cool when you start to like put all these pieces of the jigsaw together and you start to think, wow, it is all deeply connected. We are all one. Everything is all one. It's just these tiny little manifestations that are slightly different, in perspective that make us see things differently. But like I think when the Buddha became enlightened, how did he see the world? You know, he just saw everything as a manifestation of the universe. There was no good or bad, it was just a manifestation. And I think a lot of the ancients talk about this is as soon as you polarize stuff, you start to judge. Um, and the reason we judge and we polarize is because we're emotionally connected to something being right and something being wrong, or something, like we see the maniacs in the world today, but aren't they just another function of the universe? This is the question I ask myself. And of course, as human beings, we're going to judge that. But until we become enlightened, how do we really know? You know, that's my question I asked myself, is how it's not to say that you can't judge their actions, but there is still a function within that entity that's taking place. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense, John. I mean, when you said that, you know, everything does, this is what I talk about on my podcast. Everything comes from the universe, whether it's good or bad. All these controllers, for example, everything comes from the universe. And it's all there for our lesson. It's all there for our growing. It's all there. We can stay there in an angry state and say, hey, look at what they're doing. They're doing this. Or we can start, you know, empowering ourselves, looking at this deep esoteric knowledge and start talking about the solutions, but everything comes from the creator. It's all one. And when you start doing this internal work, and we will use permaculture as an example to do that, you'll find that everything is connected, everything is one, and everything is an allegory in this so-called outside physical world. And it's true, and you'll notice this more and more each time we do this work. We search for this ancient knowledge, that all these traditions are saying the same thing, that it's essentially going back to oneness. And I highly recommend people to get into the works of a Manly P. Hall. Not all Freemasonry is bad. True Freemasonry is beautiful. It teaches the individual to come out of the darkness. The dead will rise out of the dead. This is what they mean by the dead will rise in the Bible, another allegory, that will rise up into the light to make everything one, which is the essence of it. So it is truly beautiful. And, you know, we do have to be careful about protecting our magnetic field and not letting this kind of negative energy come into us. You know, you and I, we don't watch TV, we don't read the newspapers. You know, we careful what we put into our bodies, and this is all your diet. Everything is, you know, you either can go up in vibration with what you put inside your body, or you can go lower. So all of what you've said is very significant, and I encourage people to look into this kind of stuff even further. But moving on to I think it's a good time to go into the redox, John, which is the driver of the soil microbial. We need to look at both redox potential, or EH, and the pH to get the picture of how important both is, to get like a full understanding of the nutrient solubility and plant nutrition. This is key, and I know you're going to go into it further. But redox potential is a measurement of the availability of the electrons. pH is the measurement of the availability of the protons. We want to think about the impacts of redox and pH on the soil microbial, the microbial community, and vice versa, because it's another symbiotic relationship going on here. These two seemingly separate energies that really are intertwining to be one. What is the balance that we need? Because the soil ecosystem can either be constantly degrading, or it can be constantly regenerating, depending on how we are managing it, how we are innerstanding the process and applying what we learn. So it's a very, very clever process that's going on in there, and very beautiful as well once we get it right. And I know this can start to feel a bit complex, but it really is important to understand this to build an even bigger connection with nature, the soil, and the growing food. So, John, can you just take apart this process and walk the listeners through it in a sort of basic explanation?
Yeah, sure, George. So, EH, there's no real definition for EH. I'm assuming EH has just been used to kind of relate it to pH. So I just want to clear that up first of all. So
Yeah.
Redox is two words put together: reduction and oxidation. So oxidation can either mean a loss of an electron or a gain of oxygen. Okay, it's like a chemistry chemistry kind of talk. So it's not as simple as it sounds. There's always like these contradictions in chemistry. So the more reduced the soil is, so we have reduction and oxidation, yeah, redox. The more reduced the soil is, the more electrons are in the soil. So essentially the more energy is in the soil. Okay. And the more oxidized it is, the less electrons and the more oxygen present. So if you have too much oxygen in the soil, you're actually losing energy. Yeah. So we can also kind of partially relate this to pH, because they do cross over, although they're not completely, shall we say, connected. There is a crossover which I can get to. So EH has biological, chemical, and physical components. It's been suggested by Olivier Husson, who was the man who coined Redox and has probably done the most research into it. He's been working all over. He's been working all over the world. He's been studying it for decades, and he's brought it to the regenerative world. So it's been suggested that EH is more important than pH in plant and animal physiology. Okay. So EH is measured in millivolts. So everyone knows about volts. If you turn on a light bulb, you've got volts. Yeah, volts is just a way to measure electricity. So the reason they say millivolts is because obviously it's not creating a huge amount of power, but
very small.
But it's still important. It means that the soil is holding a charge, or is capable of holding a charge.
Yes.
This does relate to CEC that we were talking about before. So when you have cation exchange capacity, you have the capability for a charge to be held. Yeah. So that's really important to remember. So when you have oxidized soil, it can mean many things. It's a loss of an electron. It's an increase in oxidation numbers, the gain of oxygen, the gain of hydroxide. So there's all these different kind of terms that can relate to plant health, because essentially EH is like the measure of how healthy plants can be. So in order to hold energy into the soil, we have to have plants. You're not going to have soil without any plants that has a high EH, yeah, or has the ability to hold on to a lot of energy. So it's also important to remember that these redox reactions, so the measurement of oxidation and reduction, are all perspective based. So depending on your pH, for instance, your EH will change to a degree. Yeah, so it's really important. If we want to increase our redox or increase our EH, so remember, if you oxidize the soil, if you plow the soil, you oxidize it because you're introducing oxygen from the air into the soil. Yeah.
Absolutely.
If you don't till or don't plow, like a forest would be, a forest is going to have reduced soil. It's going to have a lot of energy. That's why it can support massive trees, right? Very rarely will you get plow. Well, I've never seen it plowed land with old growth forest, for instance, old trees. It just doesn't happen. You might get the occasional tree that's holding on, but it's really important because the roots and the mycorrhizal fungi and the bacteria and the rest of the microbiology counts on energy to make their exchanges. You can't have biological and chemical processes, natural biological and chemical processes going on without the presence of energy or the presence of electrons. So the more electrons and the more reduced, the more capability there is for life to be in the soil. Yeah. So
Yes.
how we actually get a higher energy in the soil is down to a number of things. I mean, whenever you're talking about anything like this, we have to look at nature. And one term to describe this is biomimicry. So if we want to grow really healthy food, we have to, well, we don't have to, but we would be best to replicate how nature does it. So the more plants you have in the soil, bearing in mind that they have enough room to spread their roots and enough room above ground to spread their foliage and they don't get blocked off by other plants, you're making the most of the space above, as above, so below, right? We want to replicate those two things. We want to make sure that the roots have plenty of space and the foliage has plenty of space. So the leaves need to be gaining as much photosynthesis as possible. Yeah. And that's where the energy is captured. So the sun is doing all the work. Well, the sun's providing the power, the foliage is providing the I don't like to use the word solar panels, but it's an easy term for people to understand. It's
Yeah.
capturing the energy from the sun, pulls it down into the roots, and converts solar energy into biological energy. And it stores that energy in electrons, and it then utilizes those electrons to actually start creating the environment for the biology to then get the nutrients that the plant roots need to continue through its life, for the plant to continue through its life cycle. I hope that makes sense.
It does. It does. It makes perfect sense the way that you explain it. And I really wanted to go into it in a little bit more detail. I think you've walked people through that because it all goes back to energy, and that's what it is. And it all starts from the sun. This is the generator of energy. So it's absolutely perfect. And it's just breaking down these components and understanding where there's an intelligence here, right? Because even the most tiniest thing in this world is amazing because there's an intelligence in there. Plants are born from a very tiny seed. They have memory and intelligence, and it knows the right conditions to germinate. It knows the right amount of sunlight, warmth, and water. Even when it starts growing into a plant, Even the roots know it needs its own food to grow. They know when to start blooming, when to go to seed, to repeat a cycle. The leaves of a tree naturally fall to the ground or on the soil in a forest to keep it warm in the winter. And the seeds, the plants and trees know so much more, all from a seed, that has like an internal calendar, like the astrological calendar we have, to the micro, to the macro, as above, so below. These are miracles we take for granted. That's why, the word miracles is important, because it's saying the mirror calls, and life is the reflection of us to learn. There is an intelligence there, and in everything waiting for us to rediscover and reconnect with. This is infinite intelligence, God, natural law, the Most High, the super consciousness. We can call it what we want. There's many names to it. It doesn't really have a name, because it just is. It exists, and it created us, and it is us, and we are it, and it has this own specific design. And this is important to know, because this is creation, and we are the creators. Even the word creator, create, and Tor is the torus field. It is us. We are that powerful. We need to rediscover how powerful we are, because it's just we're learning about ourselves, essentially, John, aren't we?
Yeah, George, for sure. And I think, it's interesting about the seed. I mean, everything is born from seed. Yeah.
Yes.
In some way or another, whether you're talking about plants, whether you're talking about a human being, an egg is a seed. A chicken egg is a seed, right? It is. So if you look at the seed, the seed has a protective layer, which you can liken to an egg, which is the shell. And then it has an inner layer of protection, right? And with the seed, what you've got is you've got the hard outer casing of the seed. That's the protective layer of the seed that stops the environmental damage. If an animal or birds eat a bit of fruit, the seeds will pass through their gut, their intestines, etc. And this is quite often how seeds manage to germinate in different parts of
Yeah.
that bit of land, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
They're so intelligently designed.
And don't forget, they shit the seeds out, and that shit will be the fertilizer.
Exactly. And the other thing is that we were talking about magnetic fields earlier. I believe seeds hold a magnetic field. It's probably been
Absolutely.
proved by someone. I haven't done the research, but it's only just a thought I've just had, actually. So if it's, say, in the forest, right, one of the most natural settings we still have on this planet, an animal comes along, eats a bit of delicious fruit. The tree's producing is produced those fruits to be delicious for a purpose. It's producing it so it can be eaten, because the tree's purpose is to propagate, right? One of its purposes. I'm sure that it has other purposes that we won't understand probably for years or centuries. But so the purpose is for that fruit to be eaten, so the seed can be dispersed somewhere else, so that tree can then pass on its genetics to the next generation. So in a forest and most natural setting, the animal defecates, the seeds come out, it's got that fertilizer to get it going, but it also has this strong energetic field in the soil to perhaps converge with the magnetic field of the seed, right? Because everything has to be electric. Everything has an electrical charge, even a tiny little seed. So it's just making me think, you know, about the intelligence of a seed. We can't measure it through our intelligence because we're looking through our own perspective, our own kaleidoscope, shall we say. But there is a divine intelligence to the seed. It's like there's a divine intelligence to my cat Roland sitting on the table at the moment. Um, you know, sometimes he really annoys me because he um, tries to get my attention at times when I'm trying to concentrate on something else, right? But it's I'm getting wound up through my human perspective, yeah. Whereas all he's trying to do is he's just trying to connect with me. So earlier we were sitting down having dinner and he just like put his paw on me and I thought he was trying to scratch me, not like viciously, but because he's got claws, right? He hasn't got like soft fingers like me. I'm using this as an example so people can understand that
Sure,
when
yeah.
when we judge things through our human perspective or even our emotional state at the time, we don't get the whole picture. And this is what humanity has been doing, at least for the past 100 years, probably longer. But we judge things from our perspective, from what we've learned from our conditioning. And there's never the full picture. There's so much to all of this. So I think seeds are this beautiful example of really what the DNA of a seed, what is contained within that DNA. Does it have the same makeup as our DNA, where we have memory, right? Where we actually have memory of, when you meet someone, you're like, I've met you before. I don't know where, and you can't remember in this life that you've met them, but you know that person. What is that? So it's like when a seed gets the right environmental conditions, it knows that it needs to kickstart, right? It needs to start to germinate. It knows it's the time for it to start growing, you know? So I'm just kind of, this is how my mind works sometimes. I kind of like philosophize about what do these things, what are all these connections? Because they're so beautiful and so deep. Um, and we can just say, oh, it's just a seed, it's just biology, it's just chemistry, it's just physics, but there's so much more to it than that. So I'm looking forward to the work that's going to come out about seeds in the future. One thing I did want to mention, because I know you probably want to move on to the next bit, but
That's
this
okay,
film,
mate. You carry on.
yeah, this film I talked about that's round the outside of the seed. So it's round the outer coating of the seed. What we've got is this is like a biofilm that sits around the seed. So that biofilm is like a biological coating that gives the seed what it needs to kickstart its life. So
I
the
did
reason,
read up about this some time ago, and I couldn't find the
yeah,
information, but it really resonates with me what you say.
I've got it because I'm wondering, well, we know that basically if you save a seed, right? Most people, when they save seeds, they extract the seeds from the plant, whether it's a fruit or it's some type of grain or whatever it is, and they will put it through a process to clean the seed, dry the seed, and you then put it in a particular environment to keep the seed from germinating. Yeah. So a lot of people will freeze the seed, but there are certain people in the regenerative world who are starting to say, well, the trouble is the longer we keep the seed, especially when we dry the seed, what we're doing is we're taking it out of the natural balance. Yeah.
Yes.
Because in nature, the seed will be in a stomach of an animal and then it will be defecated out and then it will go into the soil, but it will be kept in
In
its
its natural state.
state. So what people are now starting to do is they're taking it through that normal process of cleaning it, drying it, freezing it. But when they then go to plant the seed the next season, they inoculate the seed with biology. So we've worked out that there are certain microorganisms that are really key that we find in the soil that are key to kickstarting the biology of that seed, helping it
Yes.
to germinate and fight off. And this is another thing. If you want healthy seedlings, you want the microorganisms that are going to be able to strengthen the immunity of the plant as soon as it germinates.
Yes.
Yeah. So some people use EM, other people are creating their own concoctions. But I think that's really important just to mention that, because not many people know about this re-inoculating seeds. And I think it's pretty key to plant health, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important and vital that you mentioned that, you know, and you're right, you know, we're not supposed to really sort of understand this on a human level, the whole lot. Otherwise, you know, there wouldn't be anything to learn. But, you know, there is so much more that we don't know about the power a seed holds. You know, it is the life force. You know, it knows what to do by instincts, and those instincts have an instruction to to do what it's meant to do. And I think we could. I mean, there's certainly the next podcast. What we can do is to go further into more about seeds, because we could probably do a couple of podcasts on it because it's so fascinating. You know, we can
Yeah.
go into pollination, you know, self-pollinated seeds and open-pollinated seeds. We'll go through exactly what those are in the next understand how this works, because it's part of the creation process, you know, and we are creators. So to sort of integrate that, you know, on a human level and a spiritual level, it is really important for us to evolve and grow. So I'm conscious of the time, John. Would that be about 45 minutes?
Yeah, I reckon so, George. And I just wanted to kind of to reiterate. I've thought about this today actually when I was thinking about the podcast. Is like we have all these cross pollinated plants, right? All these variations, and they've all come from their wild cousins. And it's important to know that, but it's also important to know that plants evolve anyway. So I think it's about how conscious we are when we're doing this. I believe, I mean, I may change my mind, but I believe it's okay to cross pollinate plants if you're doing it in a conscious way. If you're trying to like create a labradoodle, for instance, you know, everyone knows about labradoodle. And I think the guy that
Yes.
actually created it or created the cross said it was like a bit of a mistake that he made. Because when you start to interbreed two different species, what you can do is create something that is not natural. So I think
Yes.
we need to be really mindful of why we're doing it. Are we doing it for glory and fame? Or are we doing it because we believe that, well, actually, if I mix um, this tomato species that's really productive with this tomato species that is really good if the temperature drops. Well, we know what's going to potentially happen in the future, George. So that type of tomato is going to be beneficial to us. We want plants that are not as susceptible to climatic changes as some plants out there. Right now, nature will do this of its own volition, but is that going to be able to provide what we need in the years to come? So I'm just kind of throwing that out there because I think it's important to kind of differentiate between people that breed stuff to make money and people that are doing it for a greater cause.
Yeah, absolutely. It's worth mentioning and touching upon it towards the end of this podcast. So next week we will certainly go into more of self-pollinated seeds and open pollinated seeds, manually pollinating seeds. We'll go into greater detail so people can have a more understanding and self-seeding seeds as well. So we'll go into it in more detail next week. Yeah, I hope folks are enjoying it. Is there any last words you'd like to end with, John?
No, man, just really I'm really enjoying these podcasts, and I just want to keep doing it, man, and keep expanding. And really, I want to start taking this further out because I think we can start bringing more people into this and interviewing experts in their field because I really feel this is what the UK needs right now. There's lots of people out there that have got a lot to offer, and I kind of like to give them a shared community platform to kind of to springboard from,
Yeah, absolutely. We can start thinking about in the next couple of podcasts to bring other people on. It's a learning experience for us as well. We're always learning, we're always looking to evolve and expand and learn the process of it all. So yeah, we'll start thinking about doing that in the next few podcasts.
Cool.
Yeah, so join us next week, folks. Thanks for listening, and we'll look forward to the next one.
Thanks, everybody.